The message arrived on a Tuesday morning at exactly 0800 hours Earth Standard Time. Ambassador Ji-won Park sat in her office on Nexus Station, drinking coffee that had traveled 300 light-years from Earth. The quantum communication device on her desk beeped with the special tone reserved for official Galactic Council business. Ji-won set down her cup and pressed the acceptance key. A holographic projection filled the space above her desk, showing the familiar blue and silver seal of the Galactic Council. The message began to play, spoken by a voice that sounded like grinding metal mixed with wind chimes. "To the human delegation of Earth," the voice said, "the Galactic Council formally invites your species to serve as primary mediator for the Century Peace Conference. The Vrex Commonwealth and Thalan Empire have agreed to ceasefire negotiations. Your species has been selected due to your excellent record in diplomatic solutions." Ji-won raised an eyebrow. She had expected this invitation, but something felt different about the wording. The message continued. "Please note that all mediating species must provide military advisory personnel to ensure realistic assessment of ceasefire possibilities. The conference will begin in 14 standard days aboard Nexus Station. We await your confirmation." The hologram faded away, leaving Ji-won staring at empty air. She picked up her coffee again, but it had gone cold. The part about military advisors was new. In all her years as a diplomat, Earth had never been asked to bring military personnel to peace talks. She pressed a button on her communication panel. "Please connect me to Counselor Kim on Earth." The connection took several minutes to establish. When Minho Kim's face appeared on the screen, he looked tired. His black hair had more gray streaks than Ji-won remembered, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too many wars. "Good morning, Ji-won," Minho said. "I assume you received the invitation." "I did. But there's something unusual about it. They want us to bring military advisors." Minho's expression changed. His face became very still, like a mask had fallen over it. "That's unexpected. In my 15 years of diplomatic service, we've never brought military personnel to peace conferences. Is there a reason for that policy?" Minho was quiet for a long moment. He seemed to be thinking about something painful. "There are good reasons for our protocols, Ji-won. We'll send our usual diplomatic team. No military advisors. But the Council specifically requested no military advisors," Minho repeated, his voice firm. "I'll handle any questions from the Council myself." Ji-won frowned. "Counselor, with respect, this could damage our diplomatic standing. If we ignore their direct request, other species might question our commitment to the peace process." "Better that than the alternative," Minho muttered, then caught himself. "I'll send you the full diplomatic team roster within the hour. Dr. Sun-Ho Cho will be your cultural specialist, and Lieutenant Hana Lee will assist with logistics." "Lieutenant Lee? Isn't she military personnel?" "She's on diplomatic assignment. Her official role is administrative support, not military advisory." Minho's voice carried a tone that suggested the conversation was over, but Ji-won wasn't ready to let it go. "Counselor, what's the real reason we don't bring military advisors to peace talks? The other species think we're weak. They say humans avoid conflict because we don't understand real warfare." Minho's face darkened. "Let them think that. But why? What happened to make this policy so important?" For a moment, Minho's careful diplomatic mask slipped. "The Kepler incident," he said quietly, then immediately looked like he regretted speaking. "What was the Kepler incident?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Minho said quickly. "Just follow protocol, Ji-won. Send our acceptance to the Council, but make it clear that Earth will provide diplomatic mediation only. No military consultation. The connection ended before Ji-won could ask more questions. She sat back in her chair, staring at the blank screen. In all her years working with Min-ho Kim, she had never seen him so uncomfortable about a topic. Lieutenant Hana Lee arrived at Ji-won's office 3 hours later. She was a young woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service, but something about the way she carried herself suggested military training. "Ambassador Park," Hana said, offering a crisp salute, "reporting for assignment to the Century Peace Conference." "At ease, Lieutenant. Please, sit down." Ji-won gestured to a chair across from her desk. "I have some questions about this assignment." Hana sat down with perfect posture. "Yes, ma'am. You're military personnel, but you're being assigned to a diplomatic mission. That seems unusual." "I have experience in both areas, ma'am. My official role is administrative support. But you could provide military insight if needed?" Hana hesitated. "For just a moment. I could, but my orders are very specific. I'm to assist with logistics and documentation only. No military consultation under any circumstances." There it was again, the same careful avoidance that Min-ho had shown. "Lieutenant, have you ever heard of something called the Kepler incident?" Hana's posture became even straighter, if that was possible. "That's classified information, ma'am." "So it really happened." "I cannot discuss classified operations, ma'am." Ji-won leaned back in her chair. "But it's connected to our policy about military advisors, isn't it?" "Ma'am, I respectfully suggest you direct those questions to Counselor Kim or Admiral Bay. Admiral Taejin Bay." Ji-won had heard that name before, but she couldn't place where. "Who is Admiral Bay?" "Head of Earth Defense Command, ma'am." "And he would know about the Kepler incident?" Hana's face became completely neutral. "Ma'am, I really cannot discuss this topic." Ji-won decided to try a different approach. "What do you think about the other species believing humans are weak? For the first time, Hana showed emotion. Her jaw tightened slightly. "I think they don't understand us very well, ma'am." "In what way?" "They measure strength by how quickly someone will fight. But sometimes real strength is knowing when not to fight." "Is that what we're doing, choosing not to fight?" Hana was quiet for a long moment. "Ma'am, Earth has never lost a war. We've never been in many wars." "No, ma'am, we haven't." There was something in the way Hana said it that made Ji-won think there was more to the story. But before she could ask another question, Hana stood up. "If there's nothing else, ma'am, I should prepare the departure schedules for the diplomatic team." After Hana left, Ji-won sat alone in her office, thinking about the strange conversation. Something important had happened during the Kepler incident, something that had changed Earth's entire approach to military involvement in diplomacy. She opened her computer and searched for any public records about Kepler. The only thing she found was a brief mention of a peacekeeping operation 20 years ago that had been successfully resolved through diplomatic channels. No details, no casualties listed. No explanation of what the conflict had been about. It was as if someone had carefully erased almost all traces of what had really happened. But one thing was clear. Whatever had occurred on Kepler had made Earth's leadership very careful about showing their military capabilities to other species. The question was why. Nexus Station buzzed with activity like a kicked ant hill. Representatives from 37 different species had arrived for the Century Peace Conference, and the normally calm diplomatic levels were crowded with beings of every shape and size imaginable. Ji-Won Park walked through the main conference hall, observing the various delegations as they prepared for the opening session. The Vrex Commonwealth had claimed the entire east wing of the diplomatic quarter. Their delegation was easy to spot. Tall, four-armed humanoids with gray skin marked by ritual battle scars. They wore ceremonial armor that still showed dents and burns from recent combat. Admiral Kreeth, their lead representative, stood nearly 8 feet tall. His upper arms were covered in metal bands, each one representing a battle victory. When he spoke to other delegates, his voice carried the harsh tone of someone used to giving orders that meant life or death. On the opposite side of the hall, the Thalan Empire had set up their area like a military command center. War Commander Voss was shorter than the Vrex, but her 3 eyes glowed with an intense red light that made everyone uncomfortable. Her species looked like upright lizards covered in natural armor plating. Behind her, holographic displays showed images of their recent military victories, complete with casualty counts that made even experienced diplomats look away. Dr. Sunho Cho, Earth's cultural specialist, approached Ji-Won with a troubled expression. He was a thin man with kind eyes who had spent most of his career studying alien civilizations. "Ambassador, I've been observing the other delegations. This is unlike any peace conference I've attended." "How so?" "Look around us." Sunho gestured toward the various groups. Every other species brought their most decorated military commanders. The Zephyrian Alliance delegation is led by Commander Yuna Oh, who destroyed 3 space stations in the Outer Rim War. The Rigelian Confederacy sent General Torex, who's famous for the siege of Proxima. Ji-Won followed his gaze. Commander Yuna Oh was a tall woman with blue-tinted skin and silver hair. She wore a uniform covered in medals, and her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had made too many hard decisions. When she looked at the human delegation, her expression showed clear dismissal. "They're not here to make peace," Sunho continued. "They're here to measure each other's military strength." Lieutenant Hana Lee joined them, carrying a data pad with the conference schedule. "The opening session begins in 1 hour. Both primary factions have requested permission to present their military positions first." "Military positions?" Ji-Won asked. "This is supposed to be a peace conference. Admiral Kreeth plans to show detailed analysis of Thalan weaknesses," Hana explained. "War Commander Voss wants to display their strategic advantages. Each side believes they can convince the other to surrender by demonstrating superior force." Ji-Won shook her head. "That's not how peace works." "It's how they think peace works," Sunho said quietly. The opening session was held in the station's largest conference room. Representatives sat in a great circle, with each species delegation grouped together. The Vrex and Thalan delegates sat as far apart as possible, glaring at each other across the room. Council mediator Xentar, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light, opened the conference with the traditional words, "We gather in the hope of ending conflict and building understanding between all species." Admiral Kreeth immediately stood up. "Understanding comes through strength," he declared. "The Thalan Empire must recognize the superior military position of the Vrex Commonwealth." War Commander Voss's eyes flared brighter. "The only thing the Vrex understand is force. Perhaps we should demonstrate our recent improvements in plasma weaponry." Other delegates began murmuring among themselves. Commander Yuna Oh leaned over to her aide and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This is why we need military. Advisors. Diplomats don't understand the reality of warfare. Her aide, a younger officer with the same blue-tinted skin, nodded agreement. The Earth delegation looks particularly unprepared. I've heard they avoid military conflicts entirely. Dr. Sun-Ho Cho stood up slowly. If I may address the assembly, he said in his calm, professional voice. Earth believes that lasting peace comes from understanding mutual benefits, not from displays of military superiority. General Torex of the Rigelian Confederacy let out a sound that might have been laughter. His species looked like living rocks with glowing crystals for eyes. Mutual benefits? He rumbled. The only benefit these two species understand is survival. Perhaps, Ji-Wan said, standing to support her colleague. But history shows that peace built on fear doesn't last. Real peace requires finding common ground. War Commander Voss turned her three-eyed gaze toward the human delegation. And what would Earth know about real warfare? Your species has been remarkably quiet during most galactic conflicts. The comment sent ripples through the room. Several delegates exchanged glances. Ji-Wan felt the weight of their judgment. To them, Earth's peaceful reputation looked like weakness. We prefer diplomatic solutions, Ji-Wan replied carefully. Because you lack the military strength for anything else? Admiral Kreith asked. His tone wasn't entirely mocking. It seemed like a genuine question. Lieutenant Hana Lee shifted in her seat. Ji-Wan noticed her hands clench, slightly then relax as if she was controlling herself. Commander Yuna. Oh spoke up again. Perhaps Earth would be more effective as a mediator if they had military advisors who understood the strategic realities of this conflict. We have sufficient expertise, Dr. Sun-Ho Cho said diplomatically. Do you? War Commander Voss challenged. Can your diplomatic team analyze our military capabilities? Can they evaluate the strategic value of the disputed territories? Can they understand why this war cannot end with simple compromise? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the human delegation. Ji-Wan felt the pressure of 37 species waiting for her answer. Our approach focuses on economic cooperation and cultural exchange, she said. We believe there are solutions that don't require military analysis. General Torex's crystal eyes dimmed slightly, which Ji-Wan had learned meant amusement in his species. Economic cooperation, he repeated. Tell me, Ambassador, what economic incentive is strong enough to make the Vrex give up their claim to the Kepler system? Ji-Wan's breath caught. The Kepler system? The primary disputed territory, Admiral Kreith explained. Surely your diplomatic team researched the basic facts of this conflict? She had researched it, but all the reports had referred to it as the contested border region. No one had mentioned it was the Kepler system, the same Kepler that Counselor Kim had mentioned and then refused to discuss. Of course, she said, trying to maintain her composure. We're familiar with the situation. But War Commander Voss had noticed her reaction. You seem surprised by something, Ambassador? Not at all. Please continue. The Thalan commander's eyes glowed brighter. The Kepler system contains resources worth more than the entire gross product of most species. It also controls the primary trade route between the outer rim and the core worlds. Whoever controls Kepler controls galactic commerce. Admiral Kreith added, Our respective military forces have been fighting over Kepler for 3 years. Thousands of ships destroyed. Millions of casualties. And you think economic cooperation will solve this? Dr. Sun-Ho Cho cleared his throat. Perhaps we could discuss shared administration of the system? Joint development projects that benefit both species? Commander Yuna. Oh shook her head. This is exactly why military input is necessary. Diplomats don't understand that some conflicts can only be resolved through strength. Her aide leaned forward. The Earth delegation proves this point. They're discussing theoretical solutions without understanding the military realities that make those solutions impossible. Jiwon felt frustration building inside her. And what military realities are those? The Vreks have fortified 17 star systems around Kepler, War Commander Voss explained. They've built weapons platforms that can destroy entire fleets. Any peace agreement must account for their ability to project force throughout the region. Admiral Kreeth nodded grimly. The Thalen Empire has deployed their new phase shift technology. Their ships can appear anywhere without warning. Traditional defensive strategies are useless against them. So you see, General Torex concluded, this is not a conflict that can be solved with cultural exchange programs. This requires military expertise to evaluate realistic solutions. The session continued for 3 more hours. Each time the human delegation suggested a diplomatic approach, the other species pointed out military factors that made it impossible. Each time they emphasized how much more effective the negotiations would be with proper military advisors. During a break, Jiwon walked to a quiet observation deck overlooking the station's docking bays. Lieutenant Hana Lee found her there, staring out at the stars. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. They're not entirely wrong about needing military perspective, but they're wrong about us. What do you mean? Hana was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, what if I told you that everything they're arguing about, the Vreks fortifications, the Thalen phase shift technology, the strategic value of Kepler, what if none of that really matters? I'd ask you to explain. And I'd have to tell you that my orders prevent me from explaining. Jiwon turned to face the young lieutenant. The emergency alert sirens on Nexus Station had a sound that cut through everything else. A low, pulsing wail that made every species stop what they were doing and pay attention. Jiwon Park was reviewing diplomatic proposals when the sound filled. Her quarters at 0300 hours station time. She grabbed her communication device and activated the emergency channel. The face of Station Commander Kellex appeared on screen, his normally calm features twisted with concern. His species looked like tall, thin humans with extra joints in their arms and legs. All conference delegates, please report to the main briefing room immediately. We have received urgent communications from the conflict zone. Jiwon dressed quickly and made her way through the station's corridors. Other delegates were moving in the same direction, their expressions ranging from worried to grimly satisfied. War Commander Voss walked past with her usual confident stride, as if she had been expecting this moment. The briefing room was filled with nervous energy. Representatives from 37 species crowded around the central holographic display, which showed a 3-dimensional map of the Kepler system and surrounding space. Lieutenant Hana Lee appeared at Jiwon's side, carrying a data pad that showed the latest intelligence reports. Ma'am, both factions have escalated the conflict significantly. What happened? Before Hana could answer, Station Commander Kellex activated the main display. The hologram showed the Kepler system with dozens of red markers indicating recent battle sites. At 0100 hours, a Vreks strike force intercepted and destroyed the civilian transport New Horizon, Kellex announced. The ship was carrying 12,000 Thalen colonists to a settlement in the Outer Rim. A murmur went through the room. Admiral Kreeth stood up from his position with the Vreks delegation. The transport was traveling through restricted military space. Our forces warned them to change course. War Commander Voss's 3 eyes blazed with anger. They were civilians, families with children. They were in a war zone, Kreith replied coldly. Civilian ships that ignore military warnings become legitimate targets. Dr. Sunho Cho leaned over to Ji-won. 12,000 casualties in a single attack. This is the largest civilian loss in the war so far. Station Commander Kellex continued the briefing. In response to the transport destruction, Thalan forces launched a retaliatory strike against the Vrex mining complex at Kepler 7. The entire facility has been destroyed. The hologram shifted to show the mining station, or what was left of it. Where there had once been a massive orbital facility, now there was only debris and expanding clouds of gas. Admiral Kreith's 4 arms tensed with rage. 8,000 miners were working that station. Most of them were civilians, too. Military contractors supporting the war effort, War Commander Voss corrected. A legitimate target under galactic warfare conventions. Those were families. Kreith roared, standing up to his full 8-foot height. Workers trying to earn a living. Other delegates began taking sides. Commander Yuna O of the Zephyrian Alliance spoke up. Both strikes were within the legal boundaries of warfare, even if they were morally questionable. General Torex of the Rigelian Confederacy nodded his massive stone head. War is not a clean business. Civilian casualties are regrettable but inevitable. Ji-won felt sick listening to them discuss 20,000 deaths as if they were discussing trade statistics. She stood up from her seat. This is exactly why we need to find a peaceful solution, she said. More military action will only lead to more civilian deaths. War Commander Voss turned her burning gaze toward the human delegation. And what would your species do, Ambassador, if someone killed 12,000 of your people? We would seek justice through legal channels and diplomatic pressure. Admiral Kreith let out a harsh sound that might have been laughter. Diplomatic pressure while more of our people die? Sometimes restraint requires more courage than violence, Dr. Sunho, Cho said quietly. Commander Yuna O shook her head. Restraint? Or just lack of understanding about real conflict? Her aide, the younger officer with blue-tinted skin, leaned forward. With respect to the Earth delegation, your species has never faced the kind of losses we're discussing. You've never had to make the hard choices that war requires. Lieutenant Hana Lee shifted in her seat. Ji-won noticed her jaw clench slightly, the same controlled reaction she had shown before. Perhaps, General Torex rumbled, it's time to admit that this conflict requires military expertise that Earth simply doesn't possess. We have diplomatic expertise, Ji-won insisted. Diplomacy built on what foundation? War Commander Voss challenged. What gives Earth the authority to mediate between warrior species when your own people avoid conflict? The question hung in the air like a challenge. All around the room, alien delegates waited for an answer. Ji-won could feel their judgment, their growing belief that humanity was too weak to handle a real crisis. Diplomatic attaché Hyan-an, who had been quiet throughout the conference, finally spoke up. She was a young woman with fierce eyes, who had been frustrated by the aliens' dismissive attitude for days. You want to know about conflict? Hyan said, her voice tight with controlled anger. You want to know about hard choices and military expertise? Ji-won recognized the dangerous tone and tried to interrupt. Attaché An, but Hyun continued. If you really want to know about warfare, maybe we should just show you what humans are capable of. The room fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed to fade away. Every alien delegate was staring at the human delegation with new interest. Admiral Kreith leaned forward. Show us what exactly? Hyun opened her mouth to respond, but Dr. Sunho Cho quickly stood up. I think what my colleague means is that Earth has extensive theoretical knowledge of military strategy. Theoretical knowledge, War Commander Voss repeated slowly. Not practical experience. We have enough experience, Hyun said, still angry. Commander Yuna-Oh's expression changed. For the first time since the conference began, she looked genuinely curious rather than dismissive. What kind of experience? Lieutenant Hana Lee reached over and touched Hyun's arm in warning, but it was too late. The words had been spoken, and now every species in the room wanted to know what humanity was hiding. Perhaps, General Torex suggested, Earth should provide a military assessment of this conflict. Not just diplomatic proposals, but real strategic analysis. We stand by our diplomatic approach, Ji-won said firmly. But surely you can offer some military perspective, Admiral Kreith pressed. Your attaché suggested that Earth has capabilities we haven't seen. War Commander Voss's three eyes focused on Hyun-an like targeting systems. Yes, I'm very interested in these capabilities. Station Commander Kellex, who had been listening to the exchange with growing concern, stepped forward. Perhaps we should return to the immediate crisis. Both factions have agreed to a temporary ceasefire while peace negotiations continue. Temporary being the key word, Admiral Kreith said grimly. Our people demand justice for the mining station. Attack! As do ours for the transport massacre, War Commander Voss added. Commander Yuna-Oh stood up. I formally request that the Earth delegation provide military consultation for these negotiations. Clearly, diplomatic solutions alone are insufficient. Several other delegates voiced agreement. The Rigelian Confederacy, the Synthetic Collective, and 3 smaller species all supported the request. Ji-won felt the pressure building around her, like a physical force. We will need to consult with our government before making any changes to our delegation structure. How long will that take? General Torex asked. Standard diplomatic protocol allows for 72 hours to respond to formal requests, Dr. Sunho Cho answered. 72 hours, while more people die, War Commander Voss said coldly. Admiral Kreith nodded. Every day this war continues, costs lives. If Earth cannot provide effective mediation, perhaps we should request a different mediator species, the Eye. Threat was clear. If Earth refused to provide military consultation, they would lose their role in the negotiations entirely. For a species that had built its galactic reputation on diplomatic success, that would be a devastating blow. After the session ended, the human delegation gathered in Ji-won's quarters. The mood was tense and worried. We have a problem, Dr. Sunho, Cho said as soon as the door closed. Half the species at this conference now believe Earth is hiding something. We are hiding something, Hyun-an said defiantly, and maybe it's time to stop. Lieutenant Hana Lee looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, I really think we should contact Earth Defense Command immediately. Why? Ji-won asked. What is it that everyone's so worried about revealing? Hana hesitated. Ma'am, there are things about Earth's military capabilities that could change the balance of power in this galaxy. What kind of things? The kind of things that happened during the Kepler incident, Hyun said. Ji-won turned to face her attaché. You know what happened at Kepler? I know enough, Hyun replied. I know that Earth stopped bringing military advisors to peace conferences for a very good reason. Which is? Hyun and Hana exchanged glances. Finally, Hana spoke. Ma'am, what if I told you that the war between the Vrex and Thalan Empire, a conflict that has killed millions of people over 3 years, could be ended in 72 hours? I'd ask you how. The quantum communication link between Nexus Station and Earth carried a sense of urgency that traveled faster than light itself. In the secure conference room aboard Luna Base, Admiral Tajin Bey stared at the priority message from Ambassador Park with the expression of a man who had been dreading this moment for 20 years. Admiral Bey was a compact man with weathered hands and eyes that had seen too much. His gray hair was cut in military precision, and his uniform bore no decorations except for a single medal that most people wouldn't recognize, the Kepler Crisis Resolution Award, given to the handful of officers who had participated in an operation. That officially never happened. Fleet Admiral Gyeong Song entered the secure briefing room, followed by General Mirai Yu and Intelligence Director Sang-jun Park. They all carried the same grim expression, as if they were attending a funeral rather than a strategy meeting. "The Galactic Council has voted," Admiral Bey announced without preamble. "Earth must provide military consultation for the Vrexthalan peace negotiations, or we lose our mediator status entirely." General Yu, a sharp-featured woman with steel in her eyes, set down her datapad harder than necessary. "How did it come to this? We've maintained the protocol for 20 years without problems." The peace conference delegates started asking questions. Intelligence Director Park explained. He was a thin man who seemed to blend into shadows even in well-lit rooms. "One of our diplomatic attachés made a comment about Earth's military capabilities. Now they want proof." Fleet Admiral Song, the most senior officer present, leaned back in her chair. She was a tall woman with silver hair who commanded respect just by being in the room. "We always knew this day might come. The question is whether we're prepared for the consequences." Admiral Bey activated the secure holographic display in the center of the room. The projection showed classified files marked with the highest security, ratings, documents that had been buried so deep that most people in Earth's government didn't know they existed. Kepler Protocol, Eyes Only, appeared in red letters above a collection of battle reports, casualty figures, and strategic analyses. 20 years ago, Admiral Bey began, the Galactic Council asked Earth to provide peacekeeping support for what they called a minor colonial dispute in the Kepler system. A group of primitive rebels were interfering with legitimate development projects. The hologram shifted to show the Kepler system as it had appeared 2 decades earlier. Multiple alien installations dotted the planets and asteroid fields, while defensive platforms surrounded the star itself. General Yu picked up the story. Colonel Dae-Sung Han was given command of a small task force, 3 ships, and 500 personnel. Standard peacekeeping deployment. The mission was supposed to take a week. The aliens told us the rebels were using stolen weapons to attack. Civilian targets, Intelligence Director Park added. They painted it as a terrorist situation requiring minimal force to resolve. Fleet Admiral Song's expression darkened. When Colonel Han arrived at Kepler, he found something very different than what we'd been told. The holographic display changed to show surface scans of Kepler 442b. Instead of military installations or terrorist camps, the images showed cities, farms, and schools, civilian populations going about their daily lives. The primitive rebels were the indigenous population of the planet, Admiral Bey explained. They had been living in the Kepler system for over 1,000 years. The legitimate development projects were actually forced colonization efforts. The aliens were strip mining their homeworld and forcing the population into labor camps, General Yu said quietly. When the locals resisted, they were labeled as terrorists. The hologram showed more disturbing images. Alien mining operations that had scarred entire continents, detention facilities that held thousands of civilians, and orbital bombardment sites where cities had once stood. Colonel Han requested clarification of his orders. Fleet Admiral Song continued. The alien coalition told him to suppress the rebellion by any means necessary. When he refused to fire on civilian populations, they threatened to have him court-martialed. For insubordination, Intelligence Director Park leaned forward. That's when Colonel Han made the decision that changed everything. The holographic display shifted to show tactical recordings from the operation. Earth ships that had been positioned to attack the planet's surface suddenly changed course. Instead of targeting the indigenous settlements, they moved toward the alien installations. Han turned Earth's weapons on the alien oppressors, Admiral Bay said simply. In 18 hours, a single human battle group dismantled a colonial operation that had taken 4 alien species months to establish. The tactical display showed the incredible efficiency of the human assault. Orbital platforms that had taken years to build were neutralized in minutes. Ground installations that housed thousands of alien personnel surrendered without firing a shot. Ships that had dominated the system for months fled toward the outer planets. The aliens had never seen anything like it, General Yu explained. Their military doctrine was based on massive deployments, long sieges, and gradual territorial control. They couldn't comprehend the speed and precision of human operations. Fleet Admiral Song activated another set of files. The casualty reports tell the real story. The numbers appeared on the hologram in stark detail. Human casualties: 0 killed, 12 wounded. Alien military casualties: 43 killed, several hundred wounded. Civilian casualties: 0. In less than 1 day, Colonel Han freed an entire planet without harming a single innocent person, Admiral Bay said. The precision was surgical, the restraint was absolute, and the effectiveness was terrifying. Intelligence Director Park pulled up communication intercepts from the aftermath. The alien species involved sent urgent messages to their home governments. They described human military capabilities as incomprehensibly advanced and strategically overwhelming. Word spread throughout the galaxy, General Yu added. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly became very interested in human military doctrine. The hologram showed a series of diplomatic communications from the months following the Kepler incident. Request after request from alien governments asking for military cooperation, joint exercises, and strategic partnerships. That's when we made the decision, Fleet Admiral Song said. Earth's true military capabilities were too dangerous to reveal, not because we wanted to conquer anyone, but because knowledge of our abilities would destabilize the entire galactic balance of power. Admiral Bay nodded grimly. Every species would want us as an ally or fear us as an enemy. Galactic politics would revolve around Earth's military choices. Peace would become impossible because everyone would be trying to gain our support or neutralize our threat. So we buried the truth, Intelligence Director Park explained. Official records state that the Kepler crisis was resolved through diplomatic channels. The aliens involved agreed to never discuss the details in exchange for favorable trade agreements. And we instituted the protocol, General Yu concluded. No military advisors at peace conferences, no demonstrations of capability, no discussions of human strategic doctrine. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For 20 years, Earth had maintained galactic peace by hiding its true strength. Admiral Bay deactivated the holographic display. Now, the Galactic Council is forcing our hand. If we refuse to provide military consultation, we lose our diplomatic influence. If we provide it, the galaxy learns what humans are really capable of. Fleet Admiral Song finished. Intelligence Director Park opened a new file on his datapad. There's another factor to consider. The current Vrexthalan conflict is taking place in the same Kepler system where the original incident occurred. General Yu looked up sharply. Are you saying this war is connected to what happened 20 years ago? Both species are fighting over territory that they know humans once liberated in a single day, Park explained. Part of their motivation may be to force Earth to reveal its military capabilities. A test, Admiral Bay realized. They're using this peace conference to see if the rumors about human military strength are true. Fleet Admiral Song stood up slowly. Then we have to make a choice. Maintain the secret and lose our diplomatic influence, or reveal the truth and change the galaxy forever. There is a third option, Admiral Bay said quietly, which is, we send minimal military consultation. One officer, strict limitations on what can be discussed. And we pray that we can resolve this crisis without showing them what we're really capable of. General Yu frowned. Who would you send? It would have to be someone with enough experience to be credible, but disciplined enough to maintain operational security. Admiral Bay was quiet for a long moment. I'll go myself. The others stared at him in surprise. Fleet Admiral Song was the first to speak. Taejin, you're the head of Earth Defense Command. Your presence alone would send a message about how seriously we take this situation. Exactly. And I'm one of the few people who was actually involved in the Kepler incident. I understand the stakes better than anyone. Intelligence Director Park looked concerned. The risks are enormous. If you reveal too much or if the situation escalates beyond diplomatic control, then we deal with the consequences, Admiral Bay said firmly. Admiral Taejin Bay arrived at Nexus Station without fanfare, traveling on a standard diplomatic transport with only Major Yunji Lim as his aide. He wore a simple gray uniform with minimal insignia, nothing that would suggest he was one of the most powerful military commanders in human space. Major Lim was a quiet woman with observant eyes who had served as Bay's aide for 3 years. She carried herself with the precise movements of someone trained for combat, but her official role was administrative support. Like her commander, she understood the delicate balance they needed to maintain. Ambassador Jiwon Park met them at the docking bay, her relief visible despite her diplomatic training. Admiral Bay, thank you for coming. The situation has become quite complicated. So I understand, Bay replied calmly. Brief me on the current status. As they walked through the station corridors, Jiwon explained the escalating tensions. The alien delegates had become increasingly insistent about human military capabilities. The Virex and Thalan factions were using the delay to strengthen their positions rather than seek peace, and several species had threatened to abandon the negotiations entirely if Earth couldn't provide meaningful military consultation. They're treating this as a test, Dr. Sunho Cho added when they reached the diplomatic quarters. Every species wants to see what humans can really do. Admiral Bay listened without comment until they finished the briefing. Then he asked a single question. Do any of them know about the Kepler incident? Lieutenant Hana Lee and diplomatic attaché Hyan An exchanged glances. Not the details, Hana said carefully, but some of them suspect there's more to Earth's military history than public records show. I see. Bay's expression revealed nothing. When is the next session? In 2 hours, Jiwan replied. They're expecting you to provide strategic analysis of the conflict. Then that's what I'll do. The main conference hall buzzed with anticipation when Admiral Bay entered with Major Lim. The alien delegates studied the two humans with new interest, trying to assess whether these representatives would finally reveal the truth about human military capabilities. War Commander Voss of the Thalen Empire was the first to speak. Admiral Bay, your reputation precedes you. We look forward to hearing a military perspective on this conflict. Admiral Kreeth of the Vrex Commonwealth nodded agreement. Perhaps now we can discuss realistic solutions rather than diplomatic theories. Commander Yuna. O of the Zephyrian Alliance leaned forward in her seat. We're particularly interested in your assessment of our respective military strengths. Which faction do you believe has the strategic advantage? Admiral Bay took his seat, calmly. Before I can provide any analysis, I need to understand the current tactical situation. May I see detailed projections of the conflict zone? Station Commander Kellex activated the holographic display, showing the Kepler system in 3 dimensions. Red markers indicated Vrex positions, blue markers showed Thalen deployments, and yellow zones marked areas of active combat. For several minutes, Admiral Bay studied the display in silence. The alien delegates watched him carefully, trying to read his expression for any sign of what he was thinking. Finally, War Commander Voss grew impatient. What do you see, Admiral? Bay looked up from the display. I see a conflict that could be resolved much more efficiently. Efficiently how? Admiral Kreeth demanded. That depends. Are you interested in military victory, or are you interested in ending the war? The question seemed to confuse the alien delegates. General Torex of the Rigelian Confederacy spoke up. Aren't those the same thing? Not necessarily, Bay replied. Military victory means one side defeats the other through superior force. Ending the war means finding a solution that stops the killing. Commander Yuna O's expression sharpened. And which approach would humans recommend? We would recommend ending the war. War Commander Voss's 3 eyes blazed with frustration. That's not a military analysis. That's the same diplomatic response we've been hearing for days. Admiral Bay stood up slowly and approached the holographic display. You asked for a military perspective. Let me give you one. He began touching various points on the hologram, marking positions with simple gestures. The Virex have established defensive positions here, here, and here, strong points that control access to the inner system. Admiral Kreeth nodded approvingly. Our strategic planners spent months designing those fortifications. The Thalen forces have deployed mobile strike groups that can appear anywhere using their phase shift technology, Bay continued, marking different areas. Classic asymmetric warfare doctrine. War Commander Voss looked pleased. Our tactical innovations have proven very effective. Both approaches show competent military thinking, Bay acknowledged. However, they also show fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of this conflict. The room fell silent. Every alien delegate was staring at the human admiral, waiting for him to explain. You're fighting over territory, Bay said simply. But territory only matters if you can hold it and use it productively. Neither of your current strategies accomplishes that goal. He touched more points on the hologram, highlighting supply lines and resource flows. The Vrex defensive positions require enormous amounts of material and personnel to maintain. Every Day this war continues, you're spending resources that could be used for economic development. Admiral Kreeth's forearms tensed. Military security requires sacrifice. The Thalan mobile strikes are tactically impressive, Bay continued, but they don't capture or hold strategic objectives. You can appear anywhere, but you can't stay anywhere long enough to consolidate gains. War Commander Voss's eyes narrowed. Our strategy is working. We've inflicted significant casualties on Vrex forces. You've inflicted casualties, yes, but you haven't achieved victory, and more importantly, you haven't achieved your actual goals. Commander Yuna. O leaned forward. What do you mean by actual goals? Admiral Bay turned to face the assembled delegates. Neither species actually wants to control the entire Kepler system. The Vrex need access to the mineral resources on the outer planets. The Thalan Empire wants to secure the trade routes through the inner system. These goals aren't mutually exclusive. General Torex's crystal eyes dimmed with confusion. If their goals aren't exclusive, why are they fighting? Because they're thinking like warriors instead of thinking like strategists, Bay explained. Warriors focus on defeating enemies. Strategists focus on achieving objectives. The room was completely quiet now. Even the background hum of the station seemed muted. War Commander Voss broke the silence. And what would a strategic solution look like? Admiral Bay manipulated the holographic display, showing new configurations of forces and territories. Partition, the system based on resource types rather than spatial boundaries. Vrex mining operations in the outer system, Thalan trade management for the inner system. Joint security patrols to protect both interests. Admiral Kreeth studied the new arrangement. The logistics of that kind of cooperation would be extremely complex. Less complex than maintaining a war, Bay replied. Commander Yuna O shook her head. You're describing a theoretical solution. How would this actually be implemented? What prevents one side from betraying the other? Bay's expression became very still. Mutual assured protection. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning that any attempt by either side to violate the agreement would result in immediate intervention by outside forces. War Commander Voss leaned forward intently. What outside forces? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every alien delegate was staring at Admiral Bay, waiting for his answer. Forces capable of neutralizing both factions simultaneously, he said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, understanding began to dawn on the alien faces around the room. Admiral Kreeth was the first to speak. You're talking about Earth forces. I'm talking about the guarantee that makes peace possible. Commander Yuna O's voice was barely above a whisper. How long would this intervention take to implement? Admiral Bay met her gaze steadily. 72 hours. The number hit the room like a physical blow. War Commander Voss's three eyes widened, in shock. 72 hours to do what? Deploy forces? Negotiate surrender terms? 72 hours to end the war, Bay said simply. General Torex's massive form shifted uneasily. Admiral, are you saying that Earth could defeat both the Vrex Commonwealth and the Thalan Empire in 3 days? I'm saying that Earth could make continued fighting pointless in 3 days. How? Admiral Kreeth demanded. For a long moment, Admiral Bay didn't answer. The weight of 20 years of secrecy pressed down on the room like a living thing. Finally, he spoke. The same way we resolved the situation in this system 20 years ago. War Commander Voss's eyes blazed with sudden understanding. The Kepler incident. That was you. That was us, Bay confirmed. Commander Yuna-O's voice was filled with awe and fear. You liberated an entire planet in 18 hours. We ended an unjust war in 18 hours, Bay corrected. Just as we could end this unjust war. The alien delegates stared at him in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. If Earth could defeat two major galactic powers in 3 days, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? Admiral Kreeth was the first to recover his voice. Are you threatening us, Admiral? I'm offering you a choice, Bay replied.